Module 2, Community Needs, Recruiting Children and Marketing. Assessing community need. Needs assessments can include the following aspects: the number of families and children, the socioeconomic levels of families, the ages of children to be served, and the type of service families prefer. So a needs assessment would include deciding what needs your specific community has and how you will go about meeting those needs with your program. So first we're going to start off with, how do you find out about the need? How do you find out? You can use questionnaires, you can use telephone surveys, you can have small group meetings. So any way of reaching out to the community and the families in those communities to determine what those families are in need of in regard to childcare and preschool services. So first you're going to determine the program philosophy, and the basis for choosing a program philosophy is typically based on learning, views, and values. So when we think about choosing a program philosophy, we're going to think about the assumptions about how children learn. We're also going to think about the values, how the program planners and families are involved, and then finally, views of the planners regarding basic issues in education. So based on those aspects, we would choose a philosophy for our program. So next, we're going to talk about how children learn. As you'll see here, we have a pyramid shape that they're all related: environmental, maturational, interactional. So for example, the three categories we'll be talking about are environmental. This assumes the environment and the teachers have the most influence on children's growth. The next area is the maturational. That assumes there is an internal drive force that leads to child development. And then finally, interactional. This area assumes that learning results from the dynamic interaction between the cognitive and affective systems within the environment. So next we talk about philosophy. So we have the content versus the process. So content subscribers typically support the notion that the goal of education is to provide children with content that enables them to succeed in school. So they're going to focus on preparing the next step in schooling. The achievement is typically evaluated by relating each child's progress to the norms or to a grade level. And the goal of the education under this content area is moving the child to higher levels of intellectual competency. So the process area subscribes support with the notion that problem-solving skills are much more important than the content mastery. So there's a lot of value on autonomy, collaboration, and cooperation. There's also years in school considered an integral part of life itself, so the process of going to school. A major goal of education is for children to become autonomous problem solvers, and then the process supporters support the notion that problem-solving skills are much more important than content mastery. So schooling is not viewed as either preparation for later school or preparation for life. Achievement is simply based on the ability to cope with the here and now. Next, we'll talk about types of programs. So we'll talk about not-for-profit, individual cooperative, agency-sponsored, and then public school-sponsored in the first part of our program area. So individual cooperative programs are typically owned and operated by a group. Parents are expected to help in the classroom, usually has 1 or 2 paid staff members. Costs are kept at a minimum, and tuition is typically lower than other centers. An agency-sponsored program, many are not-for-profit, early childhood education programs that are sponsored by community agencies, for example, United Way or a church group. These may be full or half-day enrichment programs and found in both rural and urban areas. Excuse me. They can serve both low-income and middle-income families, and they sometimes receive partial support from a sponsor, but obtain remaining support from tuition or grants. And then a public school sponsored program, mostly these are pre-K programs in public schools. They're typically funded through local or state money or public funds. And then our next group of programs are government sponsored. Government sponsored, an example of that might be Head Start. These are best known for federal government sponsored program. So Another example regarding Head Start programs are early Head Start programs that also serve infants and toddlers. Next, we have campus childcare programs. These are considered lab schools. They can typically be found on college campuses. The program hours are typically flexible to accommodate students' course schedules. The next one is privately sponsored, not-for-profit. These are centers sponsored by large industries, hospitals, and even apartment complexes. They offer services for children and their employees and residents. So they are a little more geared toward the business sector. They may be free or on a sliding fee scale. Profit making are typically programs that have a profit involved. So these are going to be centers that are going to be making a profit. Independent owner is our next type of program. This program is owned and operated by an individual or small group. So tuition is typically the only source of income. The next one is corporate systems. These are large childcare chains that are operated by a parent company. An example of that might be Knowledge Corps. They operate under central administration that furnishes that support financially, and they typically decide the curriculum and make all the decisions within that corporation. The next one we have is employer-sponsored. The employer-sponsored are another example of companies that may offer this type of childcare within their company. An example might be Procter & Gamble. Military programs, the Department of Defense operates a childcare program at military installations across the country. So, for example, Wright-Patt Air Force Base does have a on-site program within their within the military. Child family care homes. This area is typically considered a type of program that has child care within a home. Many parents may choose this for convenience reasons. It may be location. It's more of a home-like setting and it's much less business-like. Some factors for grouping children. The first one is the total number of children. We need to decide what our ratios are and follow licensing and also step up to quality requirements. How much physical space is available? Licensing requirements, like we mentioned, there are certain ratios that you must meet in order to be licensed. How many number of staff do you have within your program, and how flexible are you with having certain numbers in a classroom at one time? What are the skills of the staff? Do you have staff that are heavily more educated with toddlers versus preschool age? Those are decisions you'll need to make when grouping. What are the needs of the children? Do you have, for example, a lot of siblings? Do you want siblings to stay in the same group, or do you want them to be separated? And then finally, what's your program philosophy? So are you going to have a mixed age? If we have like a Montessori program, we would have a number of ages mixed in rather than just having a 2- and a 3-year-old classroom separately. So grouping differences, some of the different areas are chronological grouping and vertical grouping. Some of the benefits of chronological grouping are the task of the director is simplified, and you can have less experienced teachers find it easier to plan the learning environment. However, a disadvantage is children being exposed to differences in diversity will be lessened, and regardless of age, children will not all be in the same range of development. So when we talk about vertical grouping, this is when the classroom is grouped on the basis of age. So again, a benefit might be allowing for peer teaching among students. It facilitates cooperation and appreciation at times. And then disadvantages, maybe parental concerns. And then it's a little more complex to group and plan classroom ideas and materials and activities. So moving on with children with special needs, a director must understand IDEA, which is Individuals with Disabilities Education. An IEP is another aspect of children with developmental delays. That's an individualized education plan. So we have a number of different laws that are related to this area. So like I said, IDEA, the IDEA Act. We also have the American Disabilities Act, ADA. So these are protections for children and give them rights to be integrated in classrooms and to receive services. So collaboration and cooperation are needed to meet the needs of families who have children with special needs and for all children within the program. So when we talk about collaboration and cooperation, we need to talk about how that looks in a director's role. So for example, you're going to be meeting the needs of families who have children with special needs. Within that capacity, you're going to work with education agencies. Excuse me. You're going to collaborate with programs outside the agency. So for example, if you have a child on an IEP, an individualized education program, you're going to collaborate with that school district or the early intervention system to work on those plans and to offer input and to hopefully be a part of that IEP planning meeting. And also, you'll also be hopefully involved with the transition process into school. So when we talk about various types of forms, some of the forms you might be encountering as a director typically are obtained, the name of the child, how much detail you want to have is really up to the program and the director itself. So you might want to know names of family members, ages of siblings, address, phone number, how you're going to receive payment or how you're going to expect payment, transportation plans, how the child will be coming to school and with who. You also need to make sure that you are aware of any custody issues that may impede that transportation. You also want to consider emergency medical treatment authorization forms. You're going to include permission to participate in school programs. So, for example, a photo release or a field trip release, depending on if you are going to be providing those types of experiences. Confidentiality is a very important role of any director. Information on children and families that is recorded on forms or obtained by staff members during interviews or home visits is always going to be confidential. So please keep that in mind. You cannot be released to any unauthorized person without written permission from parents. So that's something that we need to explain to parents, that we cannot release children to someone that comes to pick up a child unless we have that in writing. Programs that are a recipient of federal funds made available by U.S. Department of Ed must be available to parents. So it's not only best practice, but it is required that we keep this information confidential within families. So next we'll talk about intake procedures. Typically, you can set this up a number of ways. It may involve an interview, a home visit, a center visit, or a phase-in. So this will depend greatly on the age of the child, family preference, and what your typical procedures are within your program. You must keep in mind too that you have to have staff available to help with this process. And if you have a large group of children coming at once, this could really take a toll on the number of your staff helping. So marketing your program. We need to decide when we are directing a program how we will do this. It can be quite expensive. Some of the marketing opportunities might be newspaper, radio, flyers, website, and even word of mouth. When you talk about different areas to spread the word, for example, you may think about community resources. Some of those resources may be your Chamber of Commerce, churches, PTA groups, or nearby businesses. So reaching out can help you to save some money in your marketing just by spreading the word. And quite honestly, parents will talk. If you have a quality program, parents will talk to other parents and recommend your program. So going on to specific types of marketing materials, we have brochures, websites, and promotional items. Finding unique slogans is always helpful, or creating a slogan for a website so they can remember your program or remember even a little chant or a song that goes along with it. And then finally, we're talking about public relations, professionalism, attending open houses, having a very aesthetically pleasing building outside and inside are always good ways to promote and market your program.